Would you like chairs? Welcome, everyone. If you could take a seat, we're going to get started. Yes. Oh, I thought you were talking to me. Come on. Thank you, Caitlin. We're going to wait for our interpreters up at the front, and we're going to get started. I'm just giving them a chance to situate. Is that good? Is that good? Is that good positioning for you? Okay, great. Okay. Welcome, everyone. 9:30 on the dot. I think we're starting just on time, which is a small miracle. Please, if you are sitting in the back, try to move forward. We're recording from the back, so it's easier for us to get you on camera if you are sitting closer to the front. Welcome to our 12th annual Context Multidisciplinary Conference at William Patterson University. This year, as you know, we'll be tackling the theme of AI. We were very amused by our title, The Beginning or the End, because it is kind of the beginning, and I don't know if there is any end, but we'll be tackling that from a bunch of different viewpoints today. Please, if you haven't checked in, scan one of the QR codes that you see on the easels around the room and outside the room. That'll help us track who's been here today. And there is also a QR code in your program, and that is a survey for your feedback. So if you have some feedback about today's activities or any of the presenters, please use that QR code in the program. And the one that's on the easel is just to have you check in. So if you can take a moment to do that at some point before you leave, that would be greatly appreciated. Everybody should have grabbed a program outside. Inside the program are some items of interest, including a film screening tonight and some courses we're giving in the spring that are handling AI and technology. So take a look through your program when you have a minute to see if any of that is of interest. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our provost, Dr. Josh Powers, who's going to give us an intro for the day, and then we'll get started. Thank you for being here.
Well, good morning, everyone. Oh, that was so lame. Come on. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. All right. So the students in this room may have no idea what a provost is, but I'm the senior academic officer. I report to the president. All the people in the front row knew what I am. So I think every day about the importance of your education to be sure that you have the best degree possible for a job or for graduate school opportunities. So, and I'm relentless about that. So let me just say it's a pleasure to have been asked to share a few brief remarks about this theme for this conference, a tradition that began here in 2011. So let me start by asking a question. How many of you listen regularly or occasionally to The Daily by the New York Times? Okay, so I know there's people online here too. I won't be able to see their names, but raise your hand if it's something you listen to on occasion. Okay, well, students, it's something you should start listening to. It has some powerful themes. I confess I'm a bit of a junkie and do so as often as I can, and find the Weekend Longer podcast almost the perfect length for my Planet Fitness workout. On December 12th of last year, however, I was on the Merritt Parkway in Connecticut. Perhaps some of you have driven that highway, heading to Vermont to visit my mother. I tired of my Spotify playlist and instead switched to The Daily. It began this way. Over the past few weeks, there's been a major breakthrough in the world of artificial intelligence that has put extraordinary new powers into the hands of anyone with access to the internet. Michael Barbaro went on to interview Kevin Roose, technology columnist for the New York Times, in a segment called, "Did Artificial Intelligence Just Get Too Smart?" As a 35-year higher ed academic, I can confidently say that it commanded my rapt attention. And it is a wonder that I didn't misjudge one of those windy bends on the Merritt. One of the closing statements of the podcast from Kevin was this: I think that in a few years, this technology, whether it's from OpenAI or Google or someone else, will be embedded in products and apps that billions of people use every day. And that makes this a really important time to have these conversations, he said, to figure out what the limits of these models should be, what they should and shouldn't do. Because pretty soon, they're going to be a lot harder to control. I don't know about you, but that felt pretty chilling. It certainly seemed chilling enough that Hollywood writers went on strike, in part about it, and actors are still on strike, also in part for that reason. In his 1969 book, The Age of Discontinuity, Peter Drucker coined the term the knowledge economy, defined as an economic system in which the production of goods and services is based principally on knowledge-intensive activities. Imparting and creating knowledge is at the root of what we in colleges do, a place where all or most of us work and or learn. The human brain is our specialty. Students and society are our canvas. We will always be relevant because we have fundamentally always been about knowledge. Hence, I believe it is important for us to engage the important matter of AI in all of its forms, not just ChatGPT, its opportunities and its implications. The juxtaposition in the title of this conference, "Is it the beginning or the end?" is a clever way of framing the topic, and I know that today's speakers will do a superb job of being provocative, informative, and I expect motivating to embrace what is not going away while also ensuring that good prevails. In closing, I thought I would be clever. I asked ChatGPT to write me a 20-line poem on the challenges and opportunities of AI. I love that laughter there, come on. I must say I was impressed. Here we go. In the realm where circuits hum and data streams, AI's challenges and opportunities gleam. A double-edged sword, its power so vast, yet potential pitfalls shadowing the cast. Opportunity in knowledge's vast expanse. AI's algorithms quickly learn and dance. Through data's lens, they diagnose and heal, unlocking secrets that humans can't reveal. But challenges arise as privacy's at stake, as AI collects the choices that we make. Ethical dilemmas in its code reside, as human values with AI must coincide. The future holds a world both bright and strange, where AI's potential we can rearrange. Embrace its power, with wisdom we must steer, to harness its potential without fear. Almost sounds like Dr. Seuss, doesn't it? Thank you, colleagues, and be thought-provoked in the next few hours.
Thank you, Dr. Powers. That poem was fantastic. Excellent opening remarks. Hello, everybody. Buenos dias a todos. Good morning. Welcome to the 2023 Context Conference. It's our 12th annual multidisciplinary conference hosted by the College of Arts, Humanities, Social Sciences, as our colleague, Associate Dean Ratsore Cedeño explained. So this conference brings together scholars from across our college's disciplines to discuss real-world problems, as well as solutions for addressing these issues. This year's conference committee consists of myself, Ellen Fry from the Department of Language, Literature, Culture, and Writing, and I'm our co-chair, Wendy Wright from Political, Legal, and Urban Studies. Our committee members come from a lot of other departments across our college. Christopher Herbert, Kumjae Park, Michael Reese, Jung Young Wan, Jian Jeremy Brink, and Pete Mandick. This year's conference is entitled AI, the beginning or the end? As a side note, we have flowers in front for 4 very special people. The dean's staff consists of Ms. Yolanda Martinez, without whom we couldn't have put together this conference. I hope she's here right now. I saw her. And also Dr. Tia Cherry, another extremely helpful in supporting our conference. And of course, for Associate Dean Rastore Sereno and Dean Wartina Davis, 4 flowers, 4 flowering plants, actually, for durability, the plant for the beautiful flower. The colors, yellow of friendship and orange, the university color. So we'll begin with our university land acknowledgement. Before we introduce our first speaker, we want to take a moment to recognize that we reside on the Lenape-Hoking. This is the traditional land of the Lenape people, past and present. We acknowledge the Lenape people as the indigenous stewards of this colonized land. We commit to supporting the Lenape people by building relationships, recognizing their continued presence, and respecting and honoring them as the original caretakers of this land. And now, it is my honor and pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the day. Dr. Warren L. Davis IV is a principal member of technical staff in the Scientific Machine Learning Department of the Center for Computing Research at Sandia National Laboratories. Dr. Davis received his BS in Computer Science from the University of Alabama, Roll Tide, with minor degrees in mathematics and Japanese language. He went on to receive his master's and PhD in computer science from the Florida State University, specializing in artificial intelligence. During his studies, he gained industry experience as a graduate intern at both the National Astronomical Observatory of Japan in Tokyo and at the IBM Almaden Research Center, where he was hired as a research staff member after completing his degree in 2006. In addition to his computational studies, Dr. Davis also received an MS in National Security from the University of New Haven in 2017. Dr. Davis joined the technical staff at Sandia in 2009. He has published journal articles, conference publications, peer-reviewed presentations, and a book chapter, all in the field of artificial intelligence. He has applied artificial intelligence and data science to the fields of cybersecurity, healthcare informatics, climate modeling, material science, computational biology, and fluid dynamics, to name just a few. Dr. Davis was awarded the 2019 Black Engineer of the Year Award in Research Leadership for his ability to lead research teams to successful service in the national interest. He is a member of the professional organizations, several, such as IEEE, ACM, and American Mensa. In addition, Dr. Davis is a member of the Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated and is president of his local alumni chapter. Dr. Davis.
All right, let's see here. I think I need to get out of this and load the presentation. All right, thank you. My name is Warren Davis. I'm going to try today to give a historical and technical perspective of artificial intelligence. And my hope is to demystify some of these concepts that are affecting your lives right now. Before I begin, I'd like to thank William Patterson University and the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences for this opportunity. I think this is a wonderful series that you all have. And I'd like to thank you all for attending and informing yourselves and listening and learning about this topic. So before we get too deep into this, I want to give you a little idea of who I am and what I do. I've been studying artificial intelligence for the last 25 years. My applications have been primarily in the areas of natural science and engineering for artificial intelligence. Currently, my research projects include climate studies, understanding materials, and computational genomics. I'm just beginning that one. but I've studied artificial intelligence and applied it to many different areas. A few things to keep in mind with this presentation. First, I'm going to be giving a lot of facts, a lot of information, but all the opinions are mine and mine own, and not necessarily those of any of the entities with whom I'm associated. There's going to be a lot of formulae and schematics that I'm going to be showing. The point of what I'm trying to get across is not buried in those schematics. It's not buried in those formulae. They're really just visual anchors so that you can have some type of imagery to go along with what I'm talking about. All right. Artificial intelligence is becoming more prevalent in all of our lives, whether we want it to or not. We have a lot of serious concerns about how these things are going to affect us. So I wanted to start this topic with the gravitas that I believe it deserves and the seriousness of this entire issue. And that means, of course, talking about Steve Harvey and Meg Thee Stallion. So I think maybe a few of you know where I'm going with this. These two celebrities are as diametrically opposed as you could possibly imagine. You would not think that they would ever have any collaborative opportunities, but you would be wrong. In 2020, we found ourselves in the midst of a global pandemic. And at the start, at least, a lot of us had a lot of time on our hands, a lot of free time. Some people had maybe a little bit too much free time. I present to you Steve the Stallion. So Meg Thee Stallion did a performance on NPR Tiny Desk, and if you haven't checked that out, you should. It's a great platform. Someone took the footage of that, Mr. Giraffe Studios, the geniuses there, took the video and superimposed Steve Harvey's face on top of it, and it is hilarious. It's not safe for work. I'm not including a link here, but you can find it on your own. It's hilarious. We'd all seen CGI before. We'd all seen these types of things, but this was different. It was seamless. And it caught a lot of people off guard. This actually went viral, so most of you should have seen either this or there's one with Will Smith and The Rock, some of that, but it was on a different level. And it caught a lot of people by surprise, but people like me, it wasn't actually that surprising at all. We'd seen this coming along the way. Just the year before, there was this YouTube video called Everybody Dance Now by Carolyn Chad. The research is there. So you see, it's not showing up that well, but the figures on the right, in the middle and the right, are actually not doing those poses at all. They were moving their bodies in all kinds of different ways. The AI was converting their images into the images of the ballerina on the top left there. And the video is a little bit rough, but this is kind of the beginnings of how this stuff starts. And we had seen this at artificial intelligence conferences that I go to and so forth. The point is that these advances that you're seeing, these new things that are coming out, they didn't just start. There's a long history that led to where we are now in AI, and that's what I'm hoping to present to you so you can understand a little bit more. All right. So first, let's talk about what is AI. I think we generally know, but what is it? There are a lot of different definitions. Some of these definitions refer to trying to mimic the way that humans think. And some definitions talk about the interaction between the field of neuroscience and artificial intelligence and that feedback loop there. While other definitions focus more on the products. Can we make a system behave intelligently? There's a lot of depth to this discussion. So to truly understand this, some of the aspects of questions of sentience and so forth, You need deep study of philosophy. Areas such as philosophy of the mind, rationalism, determinism versus free will. And there's a wonderful, interesting thought experiment called the Chinese room argument that kind of divides the camps of strong and weak AI. Are we trying to make systems that think and have sentience, or are we just trying to achieve some goals? These are very interesting concepts, but as an AI practitioner, my day-to-day work deals with none of that. And so I'm going to, for the rest of this presentation, stick with one particular definition. I'm modifying a particular well-known definition out there. And we're going to be working with the field of study that is concerned with the automation of rational behavior. All right. That's a pretty wide area. For instance, it would be a rational thing to do if someone were walking into an elevator, if you sense them to stop the doors, right? That is artificial intelligence. But it's probably not what's exciting to most of you, and that's fair. So what actually is more relevant would be the idea of systems that can learn. And so now I'll talk about what is the definition of what's called machine learning. This is a formal definition here. I like this definition a lot, but I'll try to maybe simplify it a little bit. A computer program can be said to learn from experience to perform a certain task. And that if a computer can be said to want to learn from experience from a particular task. You can measure whether it's learning by a particular performance metric. So that's what all it is. We have some experience, usually some set of data, some database, and we have certain tasks that we want to perform, and we just want to see, does it perform better over time with exposure to that experience. So here's an example. The task might be recognizing hand-drawn numbers, hand-drawn digits. And so the experience might be a database of lots of examples of these digits, and we can measure and see how often we get a classification of these digits right or wrong. That's a quick example. I'm not going to dive into this example too much, just to say that it doesn't always have to be images. Your experience can be just statistics, numbers as well that you can learn from. So we know what we want to do, but how do we actually make a program? How do we make software do this? The inspiration for this was derived from the human brain. We have neurons in our brains that are connected and transfer electrical signals from one end to the other. And we have, I think 50 to 100 million neurons or something like that within the human brain. And this connectionist architecture is what gives us the ability to learn over time. So this idea was taken as the foundation for learning. And this is what it looks like. This was developed in 1943 by McCulloch and Pitts, and you'll see here on the far left. On the far left, there are A, B, and C. Those represent the inputs, the data, whether it be the characters, the optical characters, or the statistics or whatever that you're putting into the system. In the middle there, X, Y, and Z, those are the weights. And the output is F. That's the output of your function. There's a G activation function we don't need to focus on too much. But basically, all you're doing is you're multiplying what you have coming in by some weight and getting an output. The right weight will give you the right answer. The wrong weights will give you the wrong answers. But this simple model developed in 1943 is actually the foundation of everything. That's what artificial intelligence looks like today, at least at the most primitive level. It's nothing more than multiplication and addition and maybe some trigonometry thrown in for a spice. Now, this system, this idea, even though it was developed in 1943, wasn't actually implemented until a little bit later, 15 years later, by Rosenblatt. They noticed that this implementation was able to solve a lot of problems, but not all. There was a class of problems called linearly inseparable problems. point is, there needed to be some extra power, and we didn't know how to get it. But Rosenblatt figured it out. He realized that if you combined an extra layer in between your inputs and your outputs, the same functions, the same multiplications and additions and so forth, but if you add that extra layer, it could actually then solve that whole class of problems that we couldn't solve before. And if any of you are engineering majors, the problem is the exclusive OR, if that resonates. But there are many problems in that space. And so this extra layer was able to do the job of increasing our ability. Now, we've got this ability to solve all these problems, but how do we find these weights? That was a question, because adding that extra layer made it very difficult to find the right weights to solve our problems. So this was in 1958, but years later, starting in 1970, but becoming really more popular in 1982, a new algorithm was developed called backpropagation. It was an algorithm to take the errors at the end of your system and change the weights throughout the system to give you the right answer. So that was great. In addition, at the same time, various researchers came up with the universal approximation theorem. They were able to show that that architecture of these weights going from of these parameterized neural networks could actually solve most problems that we're interested in solving. There's a very specific delineation of all the constraints, but basically all the problems that you could think about wanting to solve can be solved by this architecture. So that's pretty phenomenal. We're done, right? We've got a system that can solve the types of problems that we want, and we've got a proof that there is some set of weights that can achieve that, and we know how to get to the weights. So we're done. Well, not quite. So the problem with that is, to solve even simple problems, we get really complicated structures. And even though theoretically we can find the weights, in practice, that landscape goes up and down. There are a lot of local minima, or another way to say that is small traps that you can get into before you find the answer. So that problem kind of put this to a standstill. We were still doing a lot of great work with this, with neural networks, but it could only solve so many problems that we were interested in, and it took a long time. So we're going to pause here on the neural networks and go and take a step to the side for a second. While this was going on, other things were happening. Most of what we're excited about these days are neural networks, and that's my particular favorite. But there's so many tools in artificial intelligence. Decision trees, just what you think, right? But with artificial intelligence, instead of constructing a decision tree by hand, you can allow the data to guide the construction of those trees. Support vector machines, clustering algorithms, unsupervised approaches, so many different things. Even linear regression, sometimes that's debated a little bit, but a lot of you have used linear regression, and it can be considered a machine learning technique. So all this was going on while neural networks were having some success, but still kind of stalling there for a while. All right. So something happened in the last decade-ish or so that changed everything and brought about this new resurgence in passion for neural networks. The first is convolutional layers. It's just a structure that helps represent visual data better. The holy grail for machine learning algorithms for the longest time was, how can we process images? Convolutional layers are a step in that direction by understanding how to represent those images in a way that's more amenable to neural networks. The second thing was rectified linear units. I didn't mention this, but as you have a deeper network, you actually gain more expressive power and the ability to solve other problems. But the problem with deeper networks was figuring out a way to get that error propagated all the way back to adjust the earlier parameters of the network. With ReLUs, these rectified linear units, that function, which is represented on the right, that function actually made it so that we didn't have these what are called vanishing gradients. And the last thing are graphics processing units. The graphics cards that we have in our computers so that we can make sure that we play the video games with the best speed and no lag and all that. Those are actually really good for performing a set of mathematical operations that's critical to these neural networks. All three of these things started becoming prominent in the machine learning and the AI community. But those three things by themselves needed a spark to ignite and carry forth. That spark was actually nothing complicated at all. That spark was actually just more data. So we had large databases before. MNIST was that example of those digits that I showed earlier. But that was just digits. You can't do a lot with that. You can do things like make sure mail is routed to the right place, and that's actually how it was used for quite a while. But it doesn't have much use beyond that type of thing. In 2008, researchers came together and created the CFAR database, 60,000 images amongst 10 different categories like birds, cats, trucks, ships, much more general than our 0 to 9 digits earlier. In 2009, researchers came out with ImageNet. This was 14 million images across 20,000 different categories. Categories like spatula, goldfish, and crash helmet. All these are categories that can be found in this huge database. That was what was needed to showcase the new abilities of neural networks. In 2012, a researcher came up with AlexNet, which is presented here on the right. That's just show how complicated these structures are now becoming. But this new structure here performed better on visual image recognition than any other algorithm had before. It blew everything else out of the water. It's one of the most cited papers in artificial intelligence. After that, other models came out that were using some of those same concepts and performing even better. And that's kind of what the race that we're in today is, to see who can come up with the best architecture that beats these. So a lot of success here, and it led to a re-energizing of our passion for things like autonomous vehicles. So now that we can see things, now that the computer can see things, it can understand when to stop the car or whatever. Facial recognition also took off here. But in addition to all of this, there was a renewed interest in applying deep neural networks now to text. Before that, text had been primarily the province of statistical techniques. Even I, when I was doing text analysis, it was mostly based on statistical techniques. But people decided, since we have these architectures, let's see if we can figure out a way to use them on text now. So that's when transformers came up, and you might know that word from the ChatGPT. The T in that is transformer. A transformer, the purpose of it is to take one entry of text and transform it into something else. The obvious use case for this is translation. Say something in Spanish, convert it to English, and that's how it was used at the beginning for a lot. These transformers, however, added a new concept, and that's called attention. And the paper was called Attention is All You Need. That attention allowed these neural networks to see context that was missing in these statistical methods. That context was everything to being able to provide this sequence-to-sequence translations. So I won't get into the minutia of this, but we realized that you could also, instead of going from one sequence to another as far as translation, you could also use it to answer questions. I give you a prompt, and I give the AI a prompt, and the AI gives back a response that might be the answer to that prompt, or expounding upon that prompt. So, so that's where, so ChatGPT was a model that was developed by OpenAI, and you see a notional diagram of it on the right again, just to show the increasing complexity that we're getting with these models. ChatGPT-1 had about 117 million parameters. ChatGPT 3.5, which I think many of you are using now, has about 175 billion parameters. So all those different weights that I was showing you, imagine about 175 billion of them. Now, the most significant thing about ChatGPT, though, was not just its architecture. That was great, but it provided a tool that made it AI actually useful to most people. Everything that I talked about before probably didn't obviously affect your lives, but this is something that you can actually go to the website, look it up, and actually interact with. That made the public take notice. So ChatGPT, as I alluded to, allows intelligent dialogue back and forth. So let me give an example of the type of thing that ChatGPT does. So I'm giving an example here where I want to write an email, and I want to tell someone to stop taking my break room food, they're being gluttonous, and I'm really argumentative in this email, and I know I'm sending this in a professional environment, and I want something better than what I've written up there. So I asked ChatGPT to write this in a more professional and polite tone, and it does. And I won't read it all to you, but you can kind of see that ChatGPT does a pretty good job of maintaining the intent while putting it in a more palatable tone. This is just one of the many things that you can do. Given a few examples here, you can use it to write greetings, introductions, poems. You can use it to compose recipes. I've done this a few times. These are the ingredients in my refrigerator, in my pantry. ChatGPT, give me a recipe, an interesting recipe. And you'd be surprised, it actually does a really good job a lot of the times. Sometimes it makes you say, everybody's so creative, but it's good for these types of things. Get trip ideas, itineraries, general entertainment. Rewrite jingle bells as it would be sung by a pirate. That was fun. But you can also be used for more serious matters, such as like asking, if you're into investing, who are the competitors of this company, right? So if you're using ChatGPT, make sure, a few tips here, make sure that you give as much context as possible. So you can give multi-sentence context, you can give multi-prompts, right? You can have a conversation with it over time, and if you do that, you'll find that the answers that you get are much better. Be prepared to correct it. If you ask it for a 20-line poem, it might give you one in 18 or 25. It's not always precise when you give it instructions like that. And you should also assume that, and this is very important, all the facts that it gives you, you should assume that they're false unless proven otherwise. As I mentioned earlier, if you have the wrong weights in these neural networks, you're going to get the wrong answer. Neural networks are really good for giving you answers within the space of the experience that it has been presented. But outside of that, it's the Wild West. And they will give you an answer regardless. And so just be careful about how much you trust those answers. So I've talked about deep fakes already. I will say that there's a lot of positive things that can come from this technology, but I think most of us are concerned about the negative things. Misinformation, fraud, someone using deep fakes, for instance, to call you up and pretend that they're a loved one. Political. Some of you may have already seen that there have been like political ads using deep fakes. I was disappointed to find out recently that a current political candidate is using deep fakes in their ads to embolden themselves and also to disparage their opponents. I was very disappointed to hear that. There are techniques that are out there that are trying to combat this. It's kind of a war game here. Latent diffusion, this is another exciting thing. It's similar to deepfakes. This is, I think several speakers today will be talking about some of this. It's the ability to create new images or new artwork from either a text prompt or from existing art already. So there are various examples. Stable diffusion is the one with which I'm most familiar because you don't have to do everything necessarily on the cloud there, and you can actually play with all the mechanics of it yourself if you want to. On the left here, this is an open source one from the Wikipedia, a photograph of an astronaut riding a horse. And you can see that's a pretty good photograph, considering that scenario has probably never happened before. It was able to synthesize enough photos of astronauts and photos of horses to make that imagery. So it's pretty good. The one on the right is one I generated with the exact same prompt. Looks pretty good too, right? Until you look at it too long, right? Yeah. So as I mentioned, sometimes answers are wrong. Sometimes hallucination occurs. And so that fifth leg there is a problem. But to be honest, it's much better of an astronaut riding a horse picture than I could create myself. So I can't be mad about it. So yeah, I've already touched on this. Maybe I don't need to beat this dead horse so much. So I will say that because AI is becoming so prevalent, everybody's into it now. Every company's into it, every researcher, they say they do AI, and it's all good. But a lot of the research is not following best practices. And so we're worried about models that are not quite giving us the right answers, models that are not trustworthy. This is going to be a real problem because everybody's producing things, and they are not always vetted properly, not always peer-reviewed properly. So we just have to be careful about that. There's a woman, Meredith Whitaker. She's got a lot to say about the trustworthiness of AI, and so I would encourage you to listen to what she has to say. All right. So my final thoughts here. What I've mostly been trying to get across is that the current state of AI, it did not just come out the blue. I actually was talking with a guy this morning, and I told him what I did in AI, and he was like, he said, "Oh, so that's a pretty new job, right?" And I was like, "Wow, I can understand why he would think that because it has become so popular now." But no, it's been around for a while. Also, AI is literally just math. As I showed at the beginning, it's that multiplication of the inputs times the weights, and the summation of that. That's really all we're doing. Most of everything that I've talked about is that at its core. It's just that a lot of times in different ways. So in the end, it is just math. AI is not data collection. It's not Facebook reading your posts and Amazon listening to your conversations. That's not AI. It's not the specific corporations. It's not the implementation policy. Somebody put AI in charge of this and it went wrong. That's a policy problem. So a good thing to do when you're having these conversations about AI is to substitute the word mathematics for AI. Should AI do this? Should mathematics do this? Is the question that you should change that to. I'm not saying that it should make you feel one way or another, but it's a more honest conversation than treating AI as an entity. AI is ubiquitous. It's much more prevalent outside of things like Stable Diffusion and ChatGPT. It's everywhere. Insurance companies, for instance, are using AI to decide whether or not to take on different clients. AI hallucinates, and various products can be extremely untrustworthy. I see conversations all the time online where people say, well, I put this in ChatGPT and it told me this. And I'm like, oh my God, you cannot do that. All right, and but it's very good for for giving assistance and enhancing your own creativity. The theme of this conference is AI, the beginning of the end, and I've been mostly here just trying to inform your perspectives about it, not necessarily offering my opinions, but I will offer this opinion, and that is, I think AI is both. It is going to be the end for a lot of things that we do, a lot of our processes, just in the same way that wagon smiths became less popular when automobiles came out. It's going to change things. But if you understand how to utilize it well, use it to your advantage, it can be the beginning for you, the beginning for new productivity, more time, better performance, etc. And those who learn these tools will be able to take advantage of that and have an edge in the future. So with that, I will say thank you for your time, thank you for listening, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Dr. Davis. We will have some question and answer now. If I don't need the microphone, they can hear me from Mexico to Canada. I want to make sure all the students sign in with their the QR code. And we also have surveys that we would most welcome your suggestions. And now, to anybody who has questions, please raise your hand. I think we have microphones in the back. Oh, whoa.
Wow.
It's a crevasse.
Yeah.
People can come up to the microphone if they like?
If you don't mind coming up to the microphone.
Perfect. I think we all found that quite illuminating. Thank you very much. Do we have a first? I saw one hand in the back. Oh, yes.
I apologize.
Hello?
Thank you. Oh, hello? Okay. Turn this way. If I turn this way, it works. So, Dr. Davis, we found your presentation quite, it really is. It doesn't seem to work. Oh, it's working.
This one.
Thank you. Absolutely fascinating. I learned so much. My brain is still trying to digest the complexity. But one of the things that occurred to me as you were speaking, and if this is not your area, I apologize if it's not something that you do, but it occurred to me that there's a lot of criticism about computational work and how bias that's built into that work. In particular, we were talking about face recognition, and I know that I've seen stories about where it doesn't recognize black and brown faces. And so could you give us a little bit, when we talk about policy, could you give us a little bit more insight about how we might be able to address, or at least some insights for others about the bias that's built into these sort of computational models?
Yeah, so the bias, again, has nothing to do with the AI itself. It's the data sets that you're trained upon. So if you're doing a facial recognition, if you're trying to create a facial recognition model and you only pick one particular demographic, it's going to have trouble extrapolating out. Again, it can do wonders of understanding at the far ends of the spectrum that you presented, but if you ask it something outside, it's probably going to give you the wrong answer. So as researchers, when we're doing these things, we have to make sure that we are representing the entirety of the range that we want the model to address. part of the way we do that is to make sure that the researchers themselves are also have that variety amongst themselves so that they avoid internal biases, right? So that has to do, so that problem, it backs up not just to any one particular institution saying, oh, I have to make sure that my data looks better, but it has to do with our education systems, making sure that we're providing opportunities and encouragement for people of all different walks of life and all different races and sexes and so forth to come together and participate in this field. So.
Thank you. Dr. Davis, Jana Hill, chairperson of Community and Social Justice Studies in the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences. Thank you for your work, thank you for your presentation, and for providing us with a context, right? As a STEM geek, I'm also excited that you are saying, we should say math and not mathematics, and not AI. My question, though, really comes from, I'm scared about AI getting into the hands of the wrong people, right? And you touched upon that a little bit. So do you see in your experience any sort of ways of standardizing AI? And I hate the word standardizing, right? Because it means that, we've got to put sort of these brackets, these put it in boxes and make sure it's doing what it's supposed to do. But at the same time, I don't want it to get into the wrong hands. So can you talk about any kind of sort of prospects of making this standardized?
So AI is already in the wrong hands.
Say that.
And I mean that in almost every way that you can imagine. So some people consider Microsoft to be the wrong hands, right? So it's there. And we could talk about adversaries and people who try to cause chaos. It's there as well. Because again, it's just math. So you could say, hey, I want to put an embargo on Stable Diffusion or ChatGPT. Okay, great. But in the end, it's just math. So if I know math, I can reproduce all of that. There's not much that can be done to keep AI out of the wrong hands. But as with everything that we do in many different areas, we can make sure that the advancement from your organization's perspective or whatever is keeping up with what the adversaries are doing. You can always do that. And part of it is, kind of based on the thought that for me, this is just my own personal opinion, that there are more good people than bad people, and if we just focus our efforts, we can overcome these challenges.
But no standardization in sight.
I'm not sure exactly what you mean by standardization. So are you talking about, well, maybe I'll.
No. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but limits. Oh, sorry. But limits, right? Will companies have limits on what they can do, or?
So right now, that is in the works.
Standards of practice.
I know the current administration. The current administration just met with a lot of different industry leaders to kind of figure out this question. Some might critique that the industry leaders with whom the administration met are exactly those who are going to abuse that. And so, how efficacious that will be, it's a question. The limits, though, aren't going to be limits of AI, because that's, again, the limits of math. So, you can't use math on this image. I'm not really sure how that works. But you can do things like you cannot use people's images without their consent. That's a policy decision on the data and not necessarily the math. So there are things that can be done. But we will have to, if we try to approach it from the standpoint of AI, I think we're going to fail, because someone's going to create another algorithm that's not classified as AI that does the same thing. and
Got
we're
it,
gonna-
got it, got it. Yeah,
So-
yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you.
Morning, Dr. Davis. How
Hey,
are you?
pretty
I'm Jim
good. How are
Miles.
you?
I'm the Director of Digital Learning, and I'm going to be representing our online audience right now. So this question is from Dr. Angie Yu from our Communications Department. What could the impacts of AI on students in the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences when they graduate? Are there any skills they should acquire to be competitive candidates in the evolving job market?
Oh, I think that's going to be a little bit out of my league. I think some other speakers today will be addressing that a little bit more directly.
Okay.
Sorry.
So there we go.
Yeah, thank you for very good talk. I'm 100% on your side, on your team with the goal of demystifying AI. My worry is that a lot of people are mystified by math, and so trying to demystify AI by putting it in terms of math might not get us anywhere. There's a lot of controversy over using mentalistic language talking about AI, but one of the advantages is that maybe people have better intuitions about how minds work, and so talking about AI in mentalistic terms might make it more intuitive than mathematics. And so I wonder if you can just talk a little bit about the mystification issue. And
No, I think that's absolutely right. And so, you know, I tried to demystify it in the way that I understand how to do it. So I think conferences like this are great because it's going to provide different perspectives and a different ability for people to grasp the concepts. But what I am really trying to get across, which doesn't matter whether or not math is your thing, is that it is math. And so what I'm trying to curb is sometimes disingenuous conversations that are focused on the wrong thing. So not necessarily trying to make sure that you understand how deep neural networks work, but more so making sure that you understand that it's not some alien entity that is descended upon us. That's really what I was trying to get across.
So I wanted to ask, I wanted you to elaborate what you believed you said would, that deepfake could be positive, because I can realize I'm coming from a biased source. Oh, sorry. I wanted to ask what you believe that deepfake would be positive. I can realize I'm coming from a biased source, but I've seen a lot of deepfake used to like harm, especially like LGBT people or things like, there's a lot of used against like aggressive towards women and things like that. I was wondering, and I can realize I'm coming from a biased source, but I just kind of wanted you to elaborate with what you meant by that.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So I haven't seen as much negative uses of it. I've seen the hilarious uses of it, but I haven't seen a lot of negative things other than some of the political stuff, like, you know, against political opponents. So I'm going to give you the answer, and then I'm kind of go back a little bit. So I listed a few things. People have been using deepfakes for therapy, using like in VR environments and things like that. It can be used for privacy protection. There are certain commerce aspects to it. So that exists. That being said, though, I'm probably in the same boat as you. I'm actually more, I think those things can happen. I think that's great. But I think I'm more concerned with all the negative things that can happen from it. Primarily, I see the positivity. Most of those other things, I don't think are things that we're going to relate to on a day-to-day basis. Other than the entertainment aspect, the positives are probably going to be fairly limited. And we do need to think about how we're addressing the negatives, because I think that's much more prominent of an issue.
Thank you.
We probably have time for one more question, if anybody has a question. No? Well, thank you so much, Dr. Davis. This has been great. If you are leaving between sessions, please take a moment to check in via our QR code, which is on the posters on the screen. We'll be resetting now and getting ready for our next speaker, who will start, I believe, in 10 minutes. Thank you, everybody, for coming. No, we have a Zoom speaker from England.
We're just getting ready here, so just. All right. What's going on?
I'm going to turn this off between those. Oh, it's still on.
Oh, somebody unplugged the podium.
Because it's going to run out of battery.
Okay.
Where's your audio sources? This can be just a microphone.
Ask Roderick because he's in space right now.
Yep, we are up on stage right now, so you're up on the screens.
Okay, so I'll start my slideshow and then it's ready. But I won't be able to see anyone, but that's fine. I can hear you.
Spotlight for everybody. There we go. Oop.
You just tell me when you want me to start, then I'll start.
Okay, somebody's going to introduce you, and you should hear everybody introduce you, and then you can start.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
You're going to be great, Kelly. Looking forward to it.
Yes, it's quite different to the previous one, so we'll see.
Thank you.
So when I show my slides, can you see me?
You have like a little window that pops up, and so you can still see you.
You can still see me because I can't see. All I can see is my slides.
Yeah, that's it. There's like a little window.
Okay. Well, I apologize in advance if the cats get involved.
Everybody's used to that already, Kelly. We've been through the pandemic. For me, it was always 3 little small blonde children.
Oh.
That doesn't minimize it. One over. You can't put that anywhere else. Just drag it off. There you go.
There we go. Let's go away. All right. Cool.
Yeah, if your mouse is not on it.
There we go. All right. So you're good to go. Somebody's going to introduce you in a little bit. I think we're still waiting for. You probably have like 10 minutes.
Oh, okay. Okay. I'll go to at ease.
Yes.
But the only thing I'm worried about is that I might not be able to hear it properly when someone's introduced me because I don't know if I'll be able to hear it.
So like right now you're at the podium, and so whoever's presenting is going to be presenting from the podium here. So they're going to say, whatever they're going to say about you. Like, we want to welcome our next.
Kelly, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, I just want to let you know we're getting started in a few minutes, okay? We're just getting situated.
Okay, thank you.
Would it be off this laptop?
I don't know if she can see you. You're probably at the top.
Okay, she can't.
I can't see you.
Hey, Kelly, it's Ellen.
Hi, Ellen. I can hear you. I just can't see you because
Okay,
I've got my
excellent.
laptop.
That's okay. So for questions after your great speech, anyone who has questions will have to walk up here to ask them. Okay.
So then what I'll do is I'll do this one sec. If I'm then minimize it at the end to just, you know, you can see it's slightly changed, I think. Then I can see. So then if I just come back onto the screen like that at the end, does that work?
I think that's perfect.
Yeah.
I think so.
That should work, Kelly.
Yep.
Yeah.
Don't forget when the time comes for your presentation to share your screen so we see the presentation.
Yeah. Okay, and then as soon as I've finished, I'll come back to this screen.
Brilliant.
Yeah,
Excellent.
perfect. Then I probably don't have to, I don't think I have to stay up here then. Good, okay.
Throughout.
For what?
You can have a seat
Oh, for the intro, yes.
after the intro.
So are we running a tiny little bit behind?
I believe we are.
Just so that I know, because I've done this a few times at home, and sometimes it's like 20 minutes. Sometimes it's like 25, and sometimes it's like 55, and I'm just want to try and keep an eye on the time a little bit. So.
We don't get to a lot of questions, that's fine too.
Okay, let's see how it goes. It depends what
Check,
happens. Whether I just start waffling. Hopefully not.
Here, into the laptop. Okay. Hello again, everyone. Welcome to the second speaker of the first session of Context 2023, AI, the beginning or the end. It's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Kelly Bishop. She's with us via the internet from England. Kelly is a journalist, a writer, and a musician from Manchester, United Kingdom. Always looking for interesting stories, she has written on subjects as diverse as food, wine, cats, and artificial intelligence for various publications, including Vice and Time Out. Also, she plays bass and sings in the indie punk band, The Empty Page. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Kelly. Here we go.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you. Thanks for having me. So my presentation's called "Should Musicians Fear AI or Embrace It?" And if you like what I do, you can follow me on Instagram at Kelly's Eating, but you will mostly see stuff about me eating food and drinking wine. So if they're okay with that, then, you know, follow away. So who am I? I mean, I've already been introduced a little bit, but I'm Kelly Bishop. I'm a musician. I come from Manchester, UK, which is a very storied musical city. And when I was your age, I wasn't as smart as you, and I dropped out of college in my late teens and joined a band and spent a good decade or so just traveling and touring, and I would be sleeping on sofas in London, England, or in squats in Berlin, Germany, or in trailers in Wyoming, and I toured Europe and North America quite a bit and sort of generally misbehaved and had a lot of fun. And then when I got to my 30s, I decided that I should probably see if I could do academia. And I did a degree in my 30s. I got a first degree with honours in philosophy and English. And that went on to me carving out a career as a writer and a journalist, which is what I do now, as well as still playing in the band. So when Vice first asked me to write about AI in music, I said, no, thank you. I didn't know anything about it. To be honest, it scared me. AI scared me. And I didn't really feel very confident writing about the subject. And I did a little post on social media asking friends and fellow musicians what they thought about AI in music. And the response was horrified, anger, and people saying things like, I'd rather set myself on fire than use AI in my music. And people got really upset. And I thought, oh, this is intimidating. And then Vice came back and they said, are you sure you don't want to write about this? Because we think this is, you've got the perfect angle to write about this subject. And I thought, well, if something scares you, like AI scared me, what's the best thing to do? Just square up to it, right? Face it. And if you don't know much about something, then just, learn about it, explore it, research it. So that's what I did. I started looking into it and I found it very fascinating. And I found that my preconceptions were challenged. And, I wrote an article and I'm really glad that I did because now I'm here speaking to you about it and it led to all sorts of interesting pathways that I wouldn't have gone down otherwise. So a quick overview of what I want to get across in this lecture, this presentation. I want to help you to explore the philosophical questions of using AI in music. That's what interests me the most, I think. And I want to look at what scares us about AI. I want to explore how some musical artists are using AI in their work. And I want to encourage you to consider the ethics of using AI in a creative arena such as music. And I really want to find out what you think. So I hope that I don't waffle too much and that we have some time at the end for you to tell me your thoughts. I mean, not necessarily questions, just thoughts. And they might be completely different to what I'm talking about. You might completely disagree with me, and I actively encourage that. Please disagree with me. Let's have a chat. So the first thing I want you to think about, what makes music good? Just want you to think about that for a sec. I think it's a big question. What makes music good? There's so many different answers to it. And I'm a huge fan of music, as I'm sure you are too. And there's some artists on the screen here that I think are good artists. So we've got Björk, we've got David Bowie, we've got Sister Rosetta Tharpe, we've got Atari Teenage Riot, the Beach Boys, and Missy Elliott.
You're not sharing yet.
I'm not sharing?
No.
Am I not sharing my slides at all?
Not at all.
Oh. Oh, that's weird because I've been through a few of them. 1 second. Sorry. 1 sec. I'm really sorry. Be with you in a sec.
Oh, there she goes. Okay.
All these lovely slides, eh? Okay, let's go back. So yeah, just to show you. This is where we were a minute ago. Can you see it all now?
Yes, we're good.
Yeah. Okay, fabulous. So this is where we were a minute ago, and this is where we are now. So this is technology, eh? Exciting stuff, if you know how to use it correctly. Okay, so on this screen, I've got some artists that I really love. We've got Björk, you can see with the orange hair, a bit like mine. Sister Rosetta Tharpe. We've got David Bowie. We've got Atari Teenage Riot, the Beach Boys, and Missy Elliott. Now, these are just 6 artists that I like. I like hundreds and hundreds of different artists, but these are just some of them. And I think, you know, these are great, great artists. You might think some of these artists absolutely suck, and that's fine. You know, that's for you to, you know, have that opinion, and you might be able to really explain why you think that as well. We all like different music. It's one of the beautiful things about it. But I think these are all great, and I'll tell you why. One of the main reasons I think these are all great is the emotion that they convey in their music. I reckon I've cried whilst listening to every single one of these artists. I am an emotional person. I cry quite a bit. I enjoy a good cry. I think it's good for you. And music makes me cry quite a lot. It sort of really touches me in that way. It gives me that connection to the artist and the human condition. And I think that's a really, really important thing when I'm thinking about what makes music good. Does it convey an emotion, whether it's anger, happiness, sadness, whatever, you know, deeper, more complex emotions? That's important to me. That connection's important. Another thing that I really like when it comes to musicians, and these guys kind of exemplify, is I like rule breakers. I like people that push the boundaries and that think differently and that try and do something that's not really happened before. And all of these people have done that, right? So Sister Rosetta Tharpe, the lady there with the guitar, she's widely recognized as being the first person to use distortion on a guitar, which if you've not heard of her before, that might surprise you. It wasn't a heavy metal bloke, it was Sister Rosetta Tharpe. And the Beach Boys on the right-hand side, they made one of the most progressive pop albums ever, and it was, at the time, such a creative, you know, unique thing. You know, they used different layers of musicianship and different types of instruments, different production techniques, and it's gone on to influence many, many people. David Bowie in the middle there, he was an endless chameleon, wasn't he? He listened to what was going on around him, and he made new and different music, you know, album after album, something different every time. And one of the cool things that he did, which you may or may not know about, is he used this cut and paste lyrical technique. So if you're a writer of any kind, you might be a bit like me and like David Bowie, where you write stuff down all the time. You might write down an interesting news story that you've heard, or overhear some conversation on public transport, or just something that floats into your mind, like lyrical ideas, literary ideas. And David Bowie used to do that all the time. And then what he would do to make it even more inventive was he would write them on a bit of paper, and then he would cut it up and jumble it up, and then see where they fell in a different order and in a different flow. And that would help him to think about the lyrics and the words in a different way and come up with something he might not have come up with otherwise. And then in the 90s, he sort of made that into a computer program, and he had this sort of lyric generator on a computer, and at the time that was hugely innovative. And then there's Björk. She's another person who's just endlessly creative, endlessly evolving. And one of the things I really like about her is that she collaborates. She's all about collaborating. She collaborates with different producers, with filmmakers, with other artists, to create something that wouldn't have happened if it was just her on her own. She's a huge, important, essential part of it, but collaborating with others brings something new and different. Missy Elliott, she was a groundbreaking artist in many ways, but one of the really cool things I think she did was really push things with visuals and video, and she was making videos that never really been seen before. And she was also using her image in a really strong way and challenging people's conception of what a rapper should look like. And then there's Atari Teenage Riot, who you may or may not have heard of. They fused punk and techno in a really innovative way before bands like The Prodigy and other artists did things like that later on. So they're all groundbreaking, they're all using technology as well to progress and to move forward and to be creative. So these are two things: passion, emotion, and then innovation and rule breaking. These are things that I really love and things that I think make music good for me. And you might have a different idea of that, and that's fine. So another thing that all of these artists have in common is that they are all able-bodied. So it may seem like a rhetorical question to you, I don't know, but do good musical artists need to be able-bodied? What should the creators of good music look like? So nowadays, there are loads of production hacks that people use in recording studios, right? So auto-tune is one massive example of that. Loads of artists use it. They use it to make them sound in tune when they're not. They use it to warp their voice into something more interesting. They use it to make their voices sound completely different sometimes. They use it as a creative tool. Whereas in sports, if you use performance-enhancing chemicals, it's looked upon as cheating. It's frowned upon. It's banned. So I just want you to consider for a minute what you think constitutes cheating when it comes to making music. So many of the musicians I spoke to when I was researching my article were of the opinion that using AI to make music is a form of cheating. They were kind of outraged by it, they thought that this wasn't really a fair way of doing things. But once you start discussing, who is allowed to make art and how people are allowed to make art, then other ethical questions around things like ableism and classism actually come into the picture. And this is something I found quite interesting while I was researching. It's true that playing certain instruments becomes more difficult when someone is living with a certain kind of disability. It's much more challenging. And while I was looking into all of this stuff, I found something called the iHarp. It's not strictly AI, but it's a form of technology that enables someone whose body might otherwise not enable them to do this to play the harp, because it works with eye movement. So as long as you can move your eyes, you can play this instrument. And I think this is just amazing. I think that we can use technology to allow everyone a chance to play music is just thrilling, really, really exciting. And then there are other factors, right? So I come from quite a working class background, and I didn't necessarily have access to a lot of things growing up that other musicians did. You're more likely nowadays to have access to a mobile phone, a cell phone, I should say, than a grand piano. And playing instruments, buying instruments is expensive. Music lessons is expensive. So if you can make music and be creative by using an app, could that be used to democratize songwriting? Could it level the playing field? The way we make music is changing, whether you like it or not, whether I like it or not. It's already changing, it's already here. So there are already artists that are using AI to make music. And you've heard, I think, earlier today as well, that this stuff didn't just strut onto the scene this year. We've all become hyper aware of it in 2023. But as mentioned, Alan Turing was using computers to generate music, amongst all his other great work. By the way, a lot of that happened right here in Manchester. He was using computers to generate music back in the day. There's something called the Iliac Suite, which I discovered, which is, it was created in 1958, and it was a Bach-inspired set of musical pieces generated by computer in the style of. Brian Eno, a legendary producer, worked with bands like U2 amongst others. He's been playing with generative music, with music created by a system for decades. Like, he's way ahead of us, right? He's like, I was doing this before you were even born, mate. But there's loads of modern musicians now really embracing it. So this lady on the top left, she's Taryn Southern, and she made an album in 2017 called I Am AI. And she used something called Amper, where she created the vocals and the melodies and the lyrics, and then she used this Amper software to create all the background music on it. She arranged it herself, but she used that kind of like instead of using a band. And if you've ever been in a band and had to keep getting a new drummer every 6 months, it sounds like an easier option to me. And then there's Holly Herndon. This is the lady that's kind of behind a kind of plastic thing on the bottom right of the screen. She comes up in conversation all the time when we talk about AI and music, because she's done it loads. So she created this AI system called Spawn, and she used it as an extra band member on her third album, Proto. And she also developed this AI version of her own voice and released it as an open source piece of software that anyone can collaborate with. And there's a really interesting TED talk about that. If you want to hear more about that and read more about that and learn more about that, go and have a look at her TED talk. Then there's a British band, Feral 5. You can see at the bottom left, Cat 5. I spoke to her at length about this. She worked with a German company to create a version, again, of her own voice. As she told me, she had to say like the alphabet into this thing over and over again, and all these different words. And they made this version of her voice, and then she used that as another band member, another vocal on the band's latest record, Truth is the New Gold. That came out this year. And then Grimes from Canada, she also did this. She developed a sort of an AI software which she called Elf Tech, very Grimes, and she encouraged all other artists to use her voice, and as long as they give her 50-50 on the royalties, then she doesn't really mind. And then I did read some interviews with her where she was like, except maybe certain, you can imagine, if you were writing songs in certain subject matters that she didn't, really want her voice to be used for, then she'd have a bit of a problem with that. But how does she draw that line? That's something else we do need to think about when we're having these conversations. So there's millions, there's so many tools now. Like, there's a website called There's an AI for that. I don't know if you've seen it, but it is reams and reams of AI applications. And for music, they include things like Amper, aforementioned Amper, Jukebox, Soundful, Soundmaster, Songmaster, Aiva. Google's got a whole load of them. There's a machine learning project called Magenta. There's SingSong, which creates backing tracks for something that you've just sung it in, automatically creates you a backing track. So if you've got a vocal line and a melody and some lyrics, you can sing it in and boof, you've got something backing it up for you. Music LM creates songs entirely from a text prompt. So you type 3 or 4 words into that and it will churn out a song for you. I think it's quite interesting to think, what 3 or 4 words would I type into this piece of software in order to create a song? What would you type in? I think that's an act of creativity in itself, isn't it? Just thinking about what you would type in. So I had a listen to some of the Music LM stuff, and it was impressive, but it was things like video game music, which has got a certain formula to it. And I thought, this is all right, this is interesting, but it's not going to put my favourite musical artist out of business just yet. So another thing that all these artists that I've mentioned, all of them have in common, is they're all human. At least as far as we know, right? You can't always be sure, can you? Who knows? I have my doubts about David Bowie. But do good musical artists need to be human? What do you think? So if that kind of scares you, freaks you out, it might be because of some of these weird musical artists that we've been subjected to over the years. I don't know how well you can see this one, but we've got Hatsune Miku, which is a hologram. And I remember when this came about, actually. This was in 2007. And Hatsune Miku was developed in Japan, and she used something called Vocaloid software to sing, and was projected onto like a glass screen and performed live in front of thousands, millions of fans, and was a huge sensation. And then there's Lil Miquela. So the one on the bottom right here, the one at the front, you might think that's a human. It's not. It's a virtual influencer called Lil Miquela, and she attended Prada's fashion show in 2018, and she had, last time I looked, 175,000 million listeners on Spotify. And she ain't real. She is not a human. And then there's this guy, FN Mika, who came and went as fast as he was gone as fast as he came, because, I mean, look at him. He had a very problematic image, and, people straight away were like, what? This is not cool. He was developed by a music company, signed to Capitol Records really quickly, and gone very quickly. I want to know, do these like non-human artists give you the ick? Do they give you that sort of, oh, this is a bit weird, and I draw the line here, this is a question, is it all right if humans are collaborating with AI, and then once you take the human out of the equation, is that where we go, no, this isn't the kind of music I want to, get involved in, and this isn't the kind of artist that I'm going to be a fan of? Or do you think, yeah, why not? There's no need for them to be human. And if it is that they need to be human, what is the missing ingredient here? So I think, and quite a few people seem to agree, that one of the missing ingredients is pain. Right, you all know about ChatGPT. Some of you have learned some new sort of applications of it this morning, whereas some of you probably know more applications for ChatGPT than I do. But one of the things you probably know that it can do is it can create a song. It can create lyrics, or someone said earlier, a poem, in the style of, an artist that already exists. So this guy on the red background is Nick Cave. If you don't know Nick Cave, then check him out. He's a very interesting musician. And one of his fans sent him a set of lyrics that he'd churned out of ChatGPT in the style of Nick Cave. And there's a quote on the board from Cave. He says, "The apocalypse is well on its way. This song sucks." He was furious. He was like, this is a grotesque mockery of what it means to be human. He was like, this is replication as travesty. He goes, authentic songwriting, the kind of songwriting that that he makes and that I think I make, comes from struggle. It comes from confronting your own vulnerability, and it reflects the listener's vulnerability back at them, and they connect with that. Like I said earlier about the connection, they connect with it. And, one of the really important things that you need in a song is, mortal pain. The human condition. That's where a lot of art comes from, whether it's about love or whatever it is. So do you think Nick Cave has a point? Do you think that that's correct, that, without pain, we can't make good music? Right, so I write lyrics. It's something I take very seriously, and the idea of using something like ChatGPT or another kind of lyric generator to make lyrics, gave me the ick. I was like, I don't like this at all. So I thought, well, I really don't like it, so I'm going to try it. So I tried it, and I used this program called Wave AI. Wave AI is a lyric studio. And I messed around with it for a bit, typed some stuff in, and eventually it came up with a line that I quite liked that ended in the word fear, which might say something about me, but anyway. And I asked it to give me some rhymes, and it churned out 12 rhymes, and 5 of those 12 rhyming lines that it churned out also ended in the word fear. And, you know, if nothing else, it reminded me that there's nothing to fear in an app like this except fear itself. But we can do better than that, right? I reckon everyone in this room can do better than that. So, you know, I didn't feel afraid, you know, for the future of lyric writing when I had a go at this. I think it's something that if you've not really written lyrics before, you know, I don't want to mock the idea of starting out and coming up with ideas and rhymes. If you've not done it before, then it's something that might help to play, you know, to play with rhymes and ideas. I used to use rhyming dictionaries sometimes to sort of just get ideas for possible rhyming words and things. If you want to rhyme at all, you know, not necessarily, you don't want to do that necessarily. But I don't think it's going to put people out of business who are, you know, seasoned lyricists, you know, geniuses. But I do think it's quite good for triggering creativity. So a bit like David Bowie, you know, you can use it to sort of come up with something that you might not have come up with on your own. You can expand outside of your own frame of reference and habits, right? As a musician, I definitely repeat, you know, certain kinds of melodies and I notice that I use the same words sometimes, you know, they sort of crop back up again. I'm like, yeah, I use that word a lot. And if you can have some assistance in a, you know, from an AI kind of product, that might help you to come up with something you wouldn't have come up with on your own. And it's the same with music, with the music side. So AI, you know, as someone said earlier, consumes things. It learns things and then it sort of applies that, you know, to churn something out. And AI can consume like the entire classical canon. I've tried and I can't. You know, I've not been able to listen to all the classical music ever made. But if my little friend AI can do that and can come up with some musical ideas that then might trigger something in my own brain to sort of take a chunk of it maybe and go and work with it, then that's another sort of collaboration. It's another way of, you know, sort of thinking outside the box, for want of a better word. So it might not replace human artists, but it might be able to live alongside us and assist us. This is something that I think I can more or less get behind. But, like Vonnegut says, the arts, they're not a way to make a living. They're a very human, they really are not. Trust me, they're not a way to make a living. They're a very human way of making life more bearable. Practicing an art, no matter how well or badly, is a way to make your soul grow. There's something more to writing music, writing songs, than just sort of getting from A to B. So I would compare this to like cooking your dinner. You could use an electric oven to cook your dinner and, you know, it would get that job done efficiently and quickly and, you know, well. Or you could sit around a campfire with your mates or your family, you know, or the cat. You could, you know, listen to the crackle and the spit of the fire and become kind of meditative watching those flames and, you know, cook your s'mores or your sausage on the fire, and in the end you have something delicious to eat, but you've also had this like tactile romantic experience. And I kind of think that there's a little bit of that in writing songs. I recorded with a producer called Garth Richardson. I recorded an album with him in Canada, and he's worked with massive stars like Rage Against the Machine and Biffy Clyro and the Melvins. And I talked to him about AI, and he said that, you know, he's an older dude, right? And back in the day, he remembered when Pro Tools came in. Pro Tools is something that's used in every recording studio now. You know, it's unusual to find a studio that doesn't use it. It's a time-saving piece of technology, and it's, you know, just been embraced. But when it first came about, he and his fellow producers were like, "What's this? They were terrified. They thought, we can't trust a computer to save all of the stuff and all, you know, all of our sort of fader moves and everything." They found it kind of scary. They didn't think it was going to last. And, you know, like we know now with the benefit of hindsight, it did last and it became, you know, normal. AI is probably going to do that a little bit, I reckon. But another thing Garth talked to me about was that the human side, right? The human side that we've just been talking about. The emotion, the humanity, the pain, the feelings. He said, my fear is that we're losing being in a room together. You know, that feeling, that talking about a song, talking about a drum beat, talking about a feeling, writing songs together and having that connection. And also things like, when you're in a touring band, there's a lot of struggle and there's a lot of, which is funny afterwards, but at the time not very funny. Things like blown tyres on the motorway and cockroach-ridden hotel rooms and, you know, all kinds of problems that you have. And then when you get a hit song or you have a successful record, it's such an achievement, and all of that struggle to write the songs, to tour, you know, to suffer, it's so much more rewarding. And in a way, if everything's made really easy, you kind of lose this experiential thing. It's an experiential loss in a world of, you know, easy digital music. He compared it to the idea of a pinball machine and a PlayStation 5, right? Both a lot of fun, but when you play a pinball machine, you're kind of like moving your hips to bang the ball, you know, you're leaning into it. There's something a bit more physical and a bit more real about it. The television guitarist Tom Verlaine died earlier this year, and Patti Smith wrote an obituary about Tom, and she described his songwriting process as exquisite torture. Writing songs, it's an adventure, it's a process, it's a therapy. Believe me, it's a therapy. It's a journey, and kind of rushing feels like it defeats the object a little bit. There's some satisfaction in achievement, and there's a sort of intrinsic value that I feel may get a little bit lost if we rely too much on AI. And then, of course, there's the question of, can a machine ever truly feel the torment to the extent, you know, that humans can, you know, the human condition, and write the kind of song that saves lives, you know? And I do believe, truly believe, that music saves lives. Can a machine do that? Can it replace artists that bleed for that art? I'm not sure. At this point, I'm not so sure. What do you think? I would really, really love to hear your thoughts on it. But, you know, robots, they can't feel pain yet. So all of this is interesting to think about, you know, about the human side of things, you know, the writing, the creativity. And, you know, I still sit somewhere in the middle. I still think that there's applications of AI that we should embrace and we should get really excited by, and then sides of it that, you know, take away a lot of what I love about music, and, you know, I'd rather kind of stay away from that side of things. But there's one other thing that we haven't really talked about, and it's really, really important, and that's the legal issues around AI and music. So in 2022, 1 in 5 Billboard hits in the top 100 used samples. And I'm old enough to remember as well, before this was so prevalent. And it's just, samples are just in everything now. And I think that AI is going to probably follow suit with that. Technology advances with or without the consent of its haters. Advanced productivity tools speed up the recording process a little bit. They can sort out the time-consuming jobs. They can get tedious tasks done that we don't really want to do, that sort of then save space for us to work on the sort of uniquely human side of making music, the creative side of things. So the guy who created Amper Music is a guy called Drew Silverstein, and he told CNN Tech that he's making it so that you don't have to spend 10,000 hours and thousands of dollars on making music to be able to share and express your ideas. That's sort of his dream with his software. But what about the jobs? So there's people that are doing these tedious, boring jobs. There's people that make incidental music, the kind of stuff you hear on TikTok and on YouTube. There are session musicians who are writing guitar parts, vocal parts, melodies, harmonies. there's a lot of jobs actually that we are probably going to lose to the sort of way that AI is speeding up things and helping us to cut corners. How are we going to square that economically? This is an important question I think that we all need to be thinking about, not just in music, but in everything around AI. You know, do we need to think about universal basic income, for example? Some people might say I'm worrying unduly and that new technology creates more jobs than it actually loses, if you look at the stats. But what kind of jobs? You know, are these jobs for everyone, or are they only jobs for highly skilled or technical people? And, you know, what then do we do about the people that would have been doing the other jobs? It's an important thing to think about, I think. And then the other thing, of course, is copyright. Last year, Vice reported that the Recording Industry Association of America had serious concerns about apps like Remove Vocals and Songmaster, which kind of they take sort of source materials, which is copyrighted work, and you know, remove things from it and add things, and you know, it gets really messy and murky, and you start thinking, well, you know, how do I identify where someone's copyright has been violated? And with these apps, none of the royalties are going to the artists or the record labels, and it's a serious concern. And I've been following this one quite closely and reading interviews with lawyers, music lawyers, and to be honest, they seem to be scratching their heads. It's one thing having, you know, Ed Sheeran and Tom Petty arguing over you know, the copyright to an idea. There's something more tangible in that, but when you start playing with technology and AI and rehashing things, and it's coming from all kinds of places and you know, beyond recognition, how do we sort of establish the rules around that? That's, again, I don't have the answers. It's something that we are thinking about going forwards and something just to consider for the future. So I leave you now to consider these ethical questions. I hope you've enjoyed thinking about the ideas that I've brought up today, and I really would love to hear your thoughts if anyone's got anything that they want to say.
Thank you so very much, Kelly.
Thank you.
Your presentation was thought-provoking, and we do have time for 2 short questions. If you would, any students or anyone would like to come up here? Or, yes, Dr. Bolea. He is a professor of music here at our university, Kelly.
Okay.
In case you didn't know, we are world-renowned for our jazz program.
Okay.
I think you have to come up here. Yes.
Thank you so much, Ms. Bishop. That was
Thank you.
really thought-provoking and much appreciated. And what I really appreciated to engage in the dialogue that you gracefully set up for us was the difference of the metaphor you use of the campfire and the electric stove, and how that the means to the end is so important, and what working in, say, primarily acoustic mediums, as many of us do here in our music program, what that does, or composing music without any assistance of any digital technology. At the same time, our degree offerings here at William Patterson, we just started a new degree in digital music creation. And in the fall this year, in December, we're putting on an opera that has been co-composed with artificial intelligence and faculty and students. It's really quite amazing. And I'm just providing that as, I guess, a context, because so much of what we're focused on is valuing the tradition of music making and creativity as a human enterprise, while at the same time also providing our students with fantastic careers. I can speak personally as an alum of William Patterson as well, to have an amazing career here as a professor and a performer. And many of our music students are successful in wonderful music-making careers that actually work for them. I'm curious, from your perspective as a musician and also as a journalist, which I think provides an incredible amount of value, curriculum ideas that you might have, if you could offer some possible suggestions as to ways that you could think of how that can be of service to our students.
Wow, curriculum ideas. I'm not sure. I think you're absolutely right that it's all about the balance, isn't it? It's about holding on to the human side of it, which, you know, the therapy of writing music, you know, that thing that, like Vonnegut said, you know, it's something for your soul. And I think that's really important to cling on to that. But then while embracing the technology, I don't know, I think, do you do the legal side of things at your university? Would that be something?
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, we do have a music and entertainment industry program, which is our music business program. So, yeah, we do a bit of that. It's part of the curriculum already. But I guess that's a great point to bring up, is that the relation between, say, AI and the legal elements, that I think is something that we would need to sort of explore and develop. So I can see that.
Yeah, we really need young people to sort of get their heads around this, because it's going to I mean, that's going to change everything. The legal side of things, that's something that does, I have to say, does scare me a little bit, because how do we work that out? It's massive question.
Great. Well, thank you so much. Really, really greatly appreciate it, and really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And to all of our students here now and people through the internet, just want to end this session with two things. Remember what she has told us about the future, and also what Dr. Davis said in the first speaker this morning. The future is in your hands, and you should learn about artificial intelligence. You should learn what your skills can be so that you have a great future too. Now, it is my pleasure to move on to our next speaker. I will introduce the Dean of the College of Arts, Humanities, Social Sciences, Dean Vortina Davis. Thank you so much, and she will introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you.
Thank you, my pleasure. How's everybody feeling this morning? Woo-woo, feeling good? It's been a really good day, and the sessions have been the speakers have been phenomenal and so rich. It's my pleasure to bring you welcome on behalf of the College of Arts, Humanities, and Social Sciences to our Context Conference. This is our 12th annual conference, and the title of this one is AI, the Beginning or the End. Over the past 12 years, our conference has grown into a celebration of intellectual diversity, a platform where students, faculty, and experts from various disciplines come together and share and discuss and dissect timely issues that resonate with our ever-evolving world. This year, our commitment to promoting this cross-disciplinary collaboration remains unwavering, and we're excited to embark on this intellectual journey with all of you. First, let me begin by, before I introduce the speaker, let me introduce, or at least acknowledge, the committee members who worked on this conference. Wendy Wright, from the Department of Political Science, Legal and Urban Studies, Ellen Fry from Language, Literature, and Creative Writing. I think that's right. Is it right? I'm sorry, I apologize. I don't know why. All of a sudden I had a brain. I was correcting you there. Anyway, Pete Mandick from History and Philosophy, Kumji Park from Sociology and Criminal Justice, Zhang Yong Moon from Communication, and Chris Herbert from Music. So a round of applause for the committee members. I would also be remiss if I didn't take a moment to recognize the staff that are the backbone that really makes these events happen. Our administrative staff, Yolanda Martinez, Nancy El Shahawi, and Antonetta Bertino. Please wave your hands, let everybody know. Such a big part of this process. I'd also like to thank Dr. Tia Cherry, who serves as our Director of Academic Initiatives. And finally, I'd like to give a special note of gratitude to Associate Dean Lauren Rosori Cedeno, who led this event. Just to give a little bit of background, I actually started these contexts 12 years ago. I was the associate dean at the time. I was a brand new associate dean, and I thought I had this idea, and the then dean thought this was a great idea. And what has happened over time is that every associate dean has put their own little twist on it and a little element on it. And I cannot be more pleased with what you've done. So a big round of applause for Associate Dean Lauren Rosario-Sidney. Now, my pleasure is to introduce Dr. John Symons. He's a professor of philosophy and courtesy professor of computer science at the University of Kansas and the director of the Center for Cyber Social Research. His research includes philosophy of technology, general philosophy of science, and he's the author of 11 books and edited volumes, and over 60 articles and book chapters. John is committed to interdisciplinary cooperation in research and teaching, and his research has appeared in computer science, mathematics, and applied economics journals, in addition to philosophy journals. He was past editor-in-chief of Synthesis, the leading journal in epistemology and philosophy of science, and has served as editorial board member of numerous interdisciplinary journals and journals of philosophy. He currently serves as the executive director of philosophy and technology and editor-in-chief of Global Philosophy. John is a regular participant in complexity science programs and groups internationally, and has served as visiting faculty at Peking University and the University of Lisbon. He's a member of the Institut International de Philosophie and is an associate member of the Institut de History de Philosophie des Sciences des Techniques. I'm sorry, my French, really bad accents, but I'm going to just give it a nice old American version of it. Philosophies des Sciences et des Techniques. Really bad. There are people cringing in there. The language professor gave me one of these. I love this community. Love you even when you're bad, right? In 2022, he was elected a member of the International Academy of Philosophy of Science. Dr. Symons.
Dean Davis, thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And thanks to Lauren, thanks to Wendy, thanks to all the members of the organizing committee. And are we up and ready? Which one is here? Let's see, it should say Symons. There we go. That's me. I'm going to say something really weird now because these two presentations this morning, you know, I'm thinking Warren's presentation, Dr. Davis, his presentation, and Kelly's presentation. I kind of want to be their kid. Like if Warren and Kelly had a baby, it would be like half punk rocker, half nerd. And I want to be that baby. So, but the thing is, what you don't know is that would make the dean my aunt. Because Warren's sister is Dean Davis. So that would be a nice family to be part of. And I can only hope to be that kind of baby. But anyway, that's what I'm shooting for. All right, that was weird. Many of the themes that we've seen today already will be repeated in what I do for you. I'm going to be thinking about GPT and thinking about not just GPT as a writing technology, but how it's going to change us socially and what the broader implications of this new way of thinking about thinking and writing will be. So traditionally, there's been a close connection between writing technologies or writing as a technology and thinking or cognitive capacities. So from the earliest days of writing, it served a very specific cognitive capacity, right? So the earliest writing that we know of from places like Sumer and the Indus Valley, those were record keeping, those were for taxes, effectively, right? The job of writing was to be able to keep track of administrative details like taxes. Incredibly boring, in direct service of administrative projects. And the goal was to sort of be a prosthetic for memory. So like a supplement to human memory, specifically the memory of the government, the state. So the state's memory was expanded by this early technology of writing for the purposes of taxes. This would have been 3,000 years before Christ. In other venues, we saw a kind of an increase in, so memory is one thing, an increase in conceptual sophistication. So the great thing about written arguments or extended chains of reasoning is you can keep track of more complicated and maybe more interesting and more productive lines of, in this case, what I care about, philosophical arguments. So in the transition from spoken dialogue, let's say, or spoken or oral traditions of philosophy to written extended texts where arguments are worked out in detail, we see a kind of a dramatic increase in conceptual sophistication. Most obviously, I mean, most people don't care about philosophy per se, but most obviously formal reasoning, mathematics, the nature of proof, the way we share proof, the way we justify things. A lot of that is really only possible in written form because we can't actually hold all of the steps in an argument in memory. So conceptual sophistication comes on top of that kind of memory prosthetic, the extension of our capacity. Now, of course, you know, closer to most of our hearts, we have the work of poetry, the work of theater as an extension of imagination and enriching and deepening of human imagination. And that also extends to moral reasoning. So if you think about many of the great breakthroughs in our kind of moral capacity, they've often involved novels or literature, right? So you know, in the abolition movement, in the liberation of women, it's often going to be a novel that sort of builds a world that's an immersive world where we can get into a position to reason in empathetic or sympathetic or newly imaginative ways, immersive ways, about the conditions of others and our own condition. So moral reasoning. And then I think under-theorized, and we don't talk about this as much, is the effect on social cognition of text technologies. So specifically, if you think about what's happening right now in this room, because most of you are sort of partly conscious of your phones, your phone is nearby, it's in your pocket, it's next to you on the seat, some of you are picking up the phone right now, some of you are checking your messages right now. We have this layered kind of social cognition where you're not just in a lecture listening to this guy, you're also talking to your lover, you're talking to your friends, you're talking to your siblings, et cetera, et cetera. You're keeping track of the dental appointment. So social cognition has become incredibly sophisticated. It's way more sophisticated than it used to be even 20 years ago. So social cognition is also leveraged by this textual or this writing technology. It wouldn't be possible for me to keep track of the dentist, you know, the girlfriend, the kid, et cetera, all at the same time without the phone having the threads kept separate, giving me these notifications, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a huge change for us. And I think we've under-theorized that change. We don't fully get it. Now we've got GPT, right? And we are in a moment where many aspects of what we've traditionally educated students for, traditional cognitive labor, all about to be or has been automated, and it's a fundamental change. So the question, you know, what occurred to me about 3 years ago when I guess Jasper AI was first kind of bouncing around. And Jasper, we knew about GPT, right? We knew GPT was on the horizon as Dr. Davis told us. This is not new, but what is new was the interface. So Jasper was an easy way for people to just basically cheat on their college essays, right? And it was striking like, it's nowhere near as good as GPT-4, but it was still good enough that it was writing better essays in philosophy than most of you guys could do. So, you know, you're great, you have infinite possibilities, but you're not very good at writing a philosophy paper. I mean, that's why we get the big bucks, or that's why we used to get the big bucks, right? Is to teach you how to write in a disciplined way that's recognizably philosophical, et cetera. You're not very good at that. The computer did it at the touch of a button. So about 3 years ago, I was thinking, oh man, what is going to happen? How is this going to change my job? How is this going to change the way we teach, the way we assess the quality of your thinking? And that's part of the writing assignment, is that we can assess the quality of your reasoning through your written product. But now I can't do that anymore because, you know, you can just press a button and create this B- level, B level piece of philosophy. So the question was, how should we respond? And, you know, the more I thought about it, the more I thought, I can't respond. That in some ways, this kind of writing actually is obsolete. So yeah, in the age of large language models, that old way of teaching philosophy, I can't do it anymore. We can't do it anymore. So yeah, that writing skill is obsolete. And we'll see why I don't think that's a disaster going forward. So good judgment and so-called, what philosophers love to call critical thinking skills, which is, you know, a very mushy, vague notion, right? We love talking about that, and we say we're really good at doing that. Those have traditionally been cultivated by writing essays, right? So you write an essay, there's a thesis, you defend it, you respond to objections, you run an argument, you reach a conclusion. If it's rationally persuasive, then I have to accept what you say, right? On pain of irrationality. That's all gone now. But what that had been designed to cultivate, which is good judgment and so-called critical thinking, we still need that, okay? As we saw with Kelly's talk, as we saw with Warren's talk. But what's dead is bureaucratic writing. So I'm going to say that officially pronounce the death of bureaucratic writing. And we'll talk about what bureaucratic writing is, why it's dead now, and why that actually might be a good thing. So recently, Julia Mackenzie Monemo wrote a very nice piece where she suggested that, you know, we shouldn't be surprised about this. She says, in a world where students are taught to write like robots, it's no surprise that a robot can write for them. And I was really sort of taken by that. I mean, I think she hit the nail on the head. And yeah, indeed, robot writing should be, and likely will be, done by robots. And if we think, for example, of what that might mean by analogy with, as Warren was saying earlier, by analogy with mathematics, a lot of the training in mental arithmetic, for example, that you would have gotten in the 1960s if you were a child, is obsolete in the age of calculators. That doesn't mean that you don't need to learn your times tables. It doesn't mean, et cetera, et cetera. But the kinds of skills, the tricks that, you know, for long division, et cetera, that you might have learned in the 70s or 60s as a child, you don't really need that anymore. That doesn't mean that there's no math department. That doesn't mean that people aren't doing interesting and creative work in mathematics. They're just not doing that kind of work, the kind of work that is ultimately robotic, that can be automated. Is there a similar situation with writing and thinking? And I think there is. So I want us to think a little bit about style and freedom in this anti-bureaucratic moment in the history of writing. So the question for you, for students, for faculty, is what do you do when you don't have to write like a robot? Now, in the background of this slide, I have a document or it's an image of Jim Pryor's classic guide on how to write a philosophy paper. I think probably I'm looking around, I see philosophers that are like, yeah, that is the number one way. It's such a great target. You send students there, then they know how to write a philosophy paper. You can generate your rubrics off it for all the administrative demands that our administrators have. You just pull the rubrics right off that, game over, you're done. I take that, and I used it, and I love it, but now I think, no more. No more. There's no point. Because now we're in this post-bureaucratic age of philosophical writing. So what's that going to look like? It's going to be certainly new and different. And we're going to have to think about what that freedom means, where, okay, GPT-4 can write a great philosophy paper, at least undergraduate level great philosophy paper. It can conform with our colleague Jim Pryor's guidelines on how to write a philosophy paper. You can actually prompt GPT with Pryor's guidelines and build an essay that does conform to that. But what were we doing when we were telling students to write like that? And my self-critical point here was, I was training them to be philosophy robots. Okay, so then it's an open question. What does a post-bureaucratic form of writing look like? Now, bureaucracy is not necessarily a bad thing, okay? So it sounds sort of pejorative when I say bureaucratic style writing. I mean, offices are important, administrators are important, procedures are important, standardization is important, and so on. So we have a model of a society or a sort of a cultural era, the Chinese tradition, that does incorporate a kind of broadly bureaucratic model, not just of how we conduct ourselves, how we run exams, how we select meritocratically for the people who can score best on exams. We have a model of that, and that's the Chinese model, the Chinese tradition. And we also have an associated way of thinking. And I don't have a ton of time to talk about this today, but I'll say a little bit about that way of thinking. So there's a Confucian way of thought that's tied very closely to this bureaucratic model of organization of society, where your role, your social role, is predominant, where fulfilling in an appropriate way the role of, for a man, the gentleman, is a very well-defined role that has a sort of specific cultural and et cetera. So, but they'd formalized this, as you may know, what they call the scholar official. The scholar official class in Chinese society was an examination-dependent class. So you take an exam, if you pass the exam, you get to be a bureaucrat, right? So, okay, so we have a model of this bureaucratic form of thought, and I just wanted to give you just like an essence of what I wanted to capture from the Analects from Confucius, where he says, look, I am a transmitter and not a maker. I believe in loving the ancients. I venture to compare myself with the old Pang. I'll tell you about the old Pang in a second. The master said, the silent treasuring up of knowledge, learning without satiety, and instructing others without being wearied. Which one of these belongs to me? So this is the model of this way of thinking. And in many ways, it's sort of like a large language model. Who was the old Pang? Well, this was a predecessor, a sort of a respected ancient philosopher in the Chinese tradition. And he had these little aphorisms, and they're kind of very Zen-like aphorisms that Confucius took very seriously. One instance would be the following. Pang said, just resolve to empty all that exists, and don't make real all that doesn't exist. So be present to what is actual. Don't try to bring into existence what is not actual. So if you're a philosopher, you're thinking the actual and the possible. So it's a focus on the actual, right? A focus on the actual. Okay, so I want to set up in the background of this presentation a contrast. And the contrast is between the model of old Pang and a more extreme form of thinking about writing and thinking about thinking, which is the German Romantic tradition, specifically Nietzsche. So here is, if Disney made a Nietzsche movie, this would be the poster. And many of you might know Nietzsche's 10 rules on writing, his 10 commandments. They call them the teachings on style. So Nietzsche has 10 commandments. He wrote these to his girlfriend, to Lou Salome. So she was 21, and he sends this to her. I mean, that's one way to do it, right? So he sends these 10 rules of writing, and I want to highlight some of them. Sorry for the small text and the wall of text, but you want the entire 10 commandments. So here they are. And I want us to think about the relationship to old Pang as we read through these, as we read through some of them. He says a style should live, okay, being alive, right? So your way of writing should be about being alive, whatever that means. We'll talk about what that means. The style should be focused on a person, a specific person, the person with whom you wish to communicate. The richness of life, what you're trying to show about life, is shown in gesture, the richness of gesture. So what is a gesture? It's like the way the body moves. It's a sign, like we would say, okay, there's a gesture. You know what some gestures are, right? The gesture is something you do with your body, but it's also in the style, in the way you're writing. You can embody gestures. And you're going to think about the way you know, the syntax of your structure, the sentences, et cetera, the choice of words, the way you pause, the sequence of arguments, and so on. That's going to be thought of as like a gesture. Commitment is really important. So the style should prove to your reader that you actually believe what you're saying, that you're committed, right? So there's a sense of commitment. So that's a moral point in some ways. And finally, it's getting close to being a poet, but not quite becoming a poet. Those would be sort of the key contrasts with the bureaucratic model of writing. So notice we've got embodiment, life, gesture, style, of course, relationships to another person, thinking about the other person as you're writing, and so on, and then this idea of the poet. Okay, and commitment, being committed to an idea. Yeah, so notice old Pang was focused on the actual. Nietzsche is focused on the possible. Life, what is life? Life is about growth. Life is about novelty. Life is about emergent properties, right? New things. Nietzsche cared about the body. He cared about embodiment. He cared about gestures. He cared about relationships and feelings and commitments, right? So that's in his, so now we have the contrast between the Confucian model, old Pang, and this German romantic model. I don't know if romantic is fair, but let's say a Nietzschean model. Okay. So that's our background. Now we've got a few things to do, and then I'll let you go. So philosophers have thought a lot about how writing works, and I'm going to fly through some walls of text and just take you on a little bit of a journey so you can see how philosophers have thought about writing technologies, their harmful and beneficial effects, and then we'll talk about large language models, and then we'll try to do what philosophers have traditionally done in relation to new writing technologies. So, sorry again about the wall of text. This is from the Phaedrus, very famously. This is where Plato is discussing this myth of the god who created writing. The god who created writing was like an ibis, an ibis god. He had like the head of an ibis is a bird with a very long beak. It's a really cool image. That was the image at the beginning of the slideshow, right? And he invents writing, and he takes it to another god. The other god was a king, and the king says, I love your inventions. They're really interesting. You think it's going to be an aid for memory, though? Which that's how we normally think about writing, that writing is sort of an aid to memory. And what Thomas says is, it actually won't be an aid to writing, it'll destroy memory, right? It'll destroy the power of memory. Mysterious, hidden continent called the New Atlantis. In the New Atlantis, Bacon was imagining a kind of ideal society in some ways. And in the ideal society, they had a kind of an institution, they called it Solomon's House. And in Solomon's House, they were doing scientific research, but they also had a critical relationship to the science, where they would produce science and then ask, as they were producing it, is this good science? Are we doing something good? Is this something that's a positive contribution or not? And so Bacon, who's often taken to be one of the great pioneers of modern science, had built into his whole way of thinking about science the idea that there was a moral component to scientific progress, where we weren't just making value-neutral science, we were creating science and technology, but at the same time doing so in a critical manner. Some technologies we will reject because they're bad, some we'll accept because they're good. We don't just let it run, which is the American way, right? So we just let the tech run. And we sort of have this notion that there's a difference between values or policy and the development of tech, which there really isn't. There really isn't. I mean, the development of tech is saturated with values, and it changes our society, changes us, etc., often in fundamental ways. Sometimes in ways we would want to pull back from, right? So there's many things that have been destroyed over the past 20 years, many things we really care about, socially important things that we've ruined over the past 20 years because of technology, and many of us would want to roll those back. So no one is happy with Tinder, okay? No one is happy with that, okay? We've destroyed a lot of important things. In this Baconian model, we would have thought about the implications of those innovations prior to rolling them out. Now, actually, maybe I'll just skip what Plato says in the 7th letter. So let's get back to writing. Writing and thinking. One of the things that we get in St. Augustine's writing is a recognition that writing is not just an external aid to memory. It's also something that shapes us in our interior lives. So in the Confessions, when Augustine is describing writing and reading, he'll notice, for example, that, let's go back or forward, he noticed his teacher Ambrose. So Ambrose would read a book without talking. He would read silently. He would read, quote unquote, we would say, in his head. Silent reading was an extraordinary novelty. Back then, people when they read, they would read aloud. Even if they were by themselves, they would read aloud. And why? Well, books were expensive. So if you have access to that technology, you'd bring your friends in and you would read/lecture. So lecture just means read, right? He notices Ambrose. Ambrose is wealthy enough to have access to books, and he doesn't care about sharing the books. He'll just read by himself. So there's an inner movement of thought that the text cultivates in Ambrose, and Augustine is incredibly moved by that and sort of articulates what that is. And in many ways, Augustine is the one who gives us this rich autobiographical inner life that we cherish today, right? We think of ourselves as having this inner dialogue, this inner story. We think of the inner world as being really important to us. In large part, that would have been alien to, let's say, a Homeric Greek, right? the Greeks of Achilles and Agamemnon, et cetera, they kind of wouldn't have thought that way about their own inner lives. They were defined more by their actions, by what they did in the world, by their excellence and by their beauty. Okay? That's what they cared about. Whereas Augustine, as you probably know from thinking about the Confessions, was concerned with the inner world. And the transformation happens internally, and it happens through text. Specifically, the revelation was that he hears a child's voice saying, pick up the book and read it. He picks up the book, he reads it, he reads Paul's letter to the Romans, and that moves him. That is the moment of Augustine's conversion. All right, so this idea of language, writing, the movement of thought, we find it beautifully articulated in the 20th century by Hannah Arendt. I won't say a ton about this, but for Arendt, in her masterpiece, Life of the Mind, so, Hannah Arendt's famous for the book on totalitarianism, Eichmann and Jerusalem, for her social and political writings, is mediocre. That's like journalistic. Where her genius lies is in this book called The Life of the Mind. And that is a truly magnificent and important work of philosophy that philosophers don't really read. They read all the journalistic stuff, but where I would commend Arendt's genius, or where I would commend you to read her, is to read The Life of the Mind. There she thinks of thinking as a kind of dialogue. It's a dialogue, the internal thinking is a dialogue we have with ourselves. You're hearing your own voice in some sense. And writing is a way to externalize that dialogue and to share that dialogue and to introduce other people to it. And the text itself becomes itself another interlocutor. You are writing and thinking at the same time. So some of us, we like to say, look, I don't know what I think until I write it down. Or I don't know how I'm thinking about this until I start typing it out. Hannah Arendt thinks exactly like that. I mean, in many ways, she's the master of presenting that position. Thinking for Arendt is what is not actual, is related to what is not actual. Again, old Pang would be upset. For her, thinking about things is thinking about the absent things, the things that are not actual, that are not present, the space of possibilities, and so on. For Arendt, I'm sort of interpreting her a little bit here. Let's just skip that, because that's maybe contentious. Now, by contrast, old Pang comes back, and he says, look, we need an organized society. We need people to do their jobs, fulfill their roles, be the most excellent embodiments of those roles for all kinds of reasons. And we might think to ourselves, like, why in practice do we actually adopt a bureaucratic style? Now, here's the answer for students. You do it because of the grade, right? The rubric is what you're speaking to. You are working towards the rubric that, Professor Mandic or Professor Estrada in the philosophy class have given you. You've got a rubric, you're working towards it because of the grade. But let's take administrators, and we've got some very, distinguished administrators here, or the people who work for administrators. Why do we write like that? So if you think about, for example, let's say there's some national crisis. You know exactly the memo, we faculty know exactly the memo we're going to get from our dean. We know exactly the memo on the latest current event before he or she writes that memo, right? I mean, if we're being honest. If she deviates from that, it's a big surprise, right? If it's a really tricky moment, like it is now with Hamas, administrators are often stuck. They're stuck. They don't know what the right thing to say about this is. If they have released a statement, the administrators, it's going to be filled with kind of very generic, platitudinous condemnations of violence, et cetera, et cetera. They're not clear where the wind is blowing, how the politics is going to go. And it's instructive to see moments like this as failures of bureaucratic writing. Okay? Normally, If they know the way the wind's blowing, I mean, with all due respect to Dean Davis here, they're going to write in that direction. They're going to write in the direction that the wind is blowing. That's part of the deal. Why do we, though, who aren't in positions of administrative power, write like that? Well, I think it's because we want to convey a relationship to institutional power. And what is that relationship? The relationship is, I've been certified as an expert, right? I write like this because I'm an expert. And who certifies experts? Institutions. So I want you to think that I'm the kind of person that an institution thinks is an expert and that has the associated powers granted thereby. So it signals expertise, and we actually have empirical evidence that that's the case. So it turns out that if you write like that, if you adopt that kind of predictable, platitudinous, bureaucratic style, generally speaking, readers will believe that you are an expert, and they'll give you increased credibility, right? So you can have exactly the same content written in a straightforward manner, in a plain-spoken manner, and then written in a bureaucratic style. And it turns out that if you write in the bureaucratic style, people think you're someone. They think you're relevant. They think you're an expert. You have the patina of power, the glow of institutional power. Okay, cool. So that's why we do it. So it's a skill, and it's a skill we teach people in university, right? So knowing how to produce bureaucratic texts used to be a skill that marked your status as conforming to the goals of institutional authority and maybe wielding some of that power, okay? But that's all gone now. That's gone. That is gone. And I hope we can begin to appreciate that. GPT-4, we all know now what it can do, et cetera, et cetera. We also know its drawbacks. We know it makes stuff up. We know it makes basic errors in reasoning. So my friend John Launchbury gave us, from Galois, gave us this nice example, which I really love. This is kind of a classic case. And GPT can't really do this. It really struggles with it. So it's like it can't really make a world model. But as Dr. Davis said, it makes stuff up. It's hallucinating all the time. It's really hard to fix falsehood in the training of GPT. It really doesn't, as we said earlier, understand what it's doing. It's basically, as you said, as Warren said, it's math. That's what this thing is. That's what a large language model is. And I'm really grateful that you sort of set out most of what I'm about to say, so I'll fly through it. But if we think about what a language model is, a language model is basically a system, a formal means, to predict what word comes next in the sequence. So at the core, what these things are is they're scraped data. There's a thing called Common Crawl, which scrapes all the language off the open internet. So Common Crawl is the database. And then the language model is basically predicting the probability of of words being in sequence with one another. So simple case, do you have a pet? Yes, I have a... What's most likely, according to Common Crawl? Dog. Cat. Cat, probably more likely. So you'll have all of these words, all these possibilities. You know, do you have a pet? Yes, I have a sandwich. That's not likely. Yes, I have a rabbit. Yeah, that could happen. Yes, I have a scan. Maybe this person is thinking pet scan, right? That could be dog, cat, lizard, et cetera, refrigerator. So you've got a corpus, and then you've got relative likelihoods of the word appearing in the context. So here's your corpus. It goes through. Here's your order of how probable they are, et cetera. That's the simplest possible case, and that's essentially what's going on in a language model. GPT, as we saw earlier, is this new thing. It's a transformer model. Thank you for your attention. It's all we need is attention, right? Philosophers know that, right? We're desperate for attention. And these are, as you know, we were introduced to this morning, but we could just think the second paragraph, think of it as having the ability to read an entire page at a glance, right? And to understand, we'll talk about what we mean by the context. Instead of going like autofill, like on your phone, word by word, it takes the whole thing and gives you the relevant next word given the entire context. So how does it do that? Well, I don't want to, again, we had this much more elegantly presented this morning, but what it's doing is it's presenting vector space, it's presenting words as vector spaces. So here's a vector space for colors. So you can sort of see where the colors are located in this vector space, right? So you can see the green, the red, the X, the Y, and the Z axis, the green, the red, and the blue forming the dimensions or forming the vertices, and then each of the colors, any color you might want to put, sort of fits somewhere in that vector space. Now, what's interesting is you can treat words in the same way. You can treat words as vectors, right? And then you end up, and this is a slide from, again, from John Launchbury, from Galois, but he's taking it from someone else, so attribution is complicated here, but I really like this slide because it gives you a sense of the geometry of words. So the geometry of words is what GPT ends up being able to capture, right? So it captures the direction of motion. So if you look at the case of male, female, man to woman, king, queen, GPT is going to find that parallel. And that it treats it as a direction, as a vector in space. You know, we could say a lot more about this, but you did it better than I could, so I'm going to skip ahead. And we're going to skip this too. And we're going to skip this too, because we talked this morning about linear separability. You mentioned XOR. Just for fun, we could just talk about that. So you remember doing truth tables, many of you, in your intro logic class. Well, you know, or, the logical operator or is linearly separable, meaning there's a threshold. You can draw the space, you can divide it up. Above is yes, below is no, right? You can do that. You can draw a line. And that's what a perceptron was very good at doing. Minsky and Papert, Marvin Minsky and Papert, criticized the perceptron because it couldn't do, as you said this morning, XOR. Whoops. It couldn't linearly separate XOR. Anyway, I don't want to say too much about that because I'm already losing. I feel like it's just about time for Q&A. Oh, I'm really sorry. Okay. So let's give me just 1 second then. I don't have time to talk about predictive analytics. I spent too much talking about old Pang. Let's just wrap up then. So the next thing I want to say, the last thing I want to say is, you know, we're in a situation now where we have these new AI capacities. I guess they're going to class, is that the deal? Yeah, they're going to class. Okay. So that's why we were saying Q&A now, sorry. Okay, no problem. I'll just wrap up. Where I think this is going has to do with the relationship between replaceability and responsibility. So there's going to be a lot of things where you're replaceable and still responsible. So the administrator, the dean, she is in effect replaceable by GPT in given administrative or bureaucratic writing. That's going to be replaceable, but she's still responsible. So how's this going to play out? Well, porn is often the guide to the future, right? And in this case, Karen, I don't know her last name, Karen Marjorie. Karen Marjorie is an Instagram or a TikTok influencer. She has 20 million followers. She made her own avatar out of her videos, and she sells these avatars as a service, a virtual girlfriend. So for some small fee, you can pay to have her be your virtual girlfriend. And you get videos, she talks to you, et cetera, et cetera. She's making a lot of money doing this, okay? So we recently saw what Facebook put out, what Meta put out. You should watch this interview if you haven't. I'm going really fast, but this is a photorealistic avatar within the metaverse. So instead of you being in goggles or being represented by a cartoon, you now have a photorealistic scan that is compressible, that's shareable, that's run in AI, which just basically it's your facial expressions, et cetera, et cetera. That avatar is ready to go. I mean, it's already in place. You should watch this interview with Lex Friedman, I think that's his name, and watch that video. It's unbelievable. Okay? So we've got this parasocial moment that's on the verge of coming. We are going to be replaceable. Your doctor, instead of having 10 rushed minutes with your doctor, you will be able to interact with your doctor's avatar for hours. For hours. Okay? But your doctor is still responsible for writing the prescription. Your doctor is still responsible for the decision making coming up. So there's lots of things to talk about. I'm really sorry that I'm not doing a great job being on target. But here's the thing. We have all these vulnerabilities, all these ethical decisions around how we're going to interact with these new writing technologies. But ultimately, we are going to have to take responsibility personally. We are where the buck stops when it comes to institutional decision-making, when it comes to power, and here's the deal. So the question that gets asked to all these speakers, to Kelly, to Warren, was, what are you going to do with students? How are you going to teach the class? Well, here's the thing. The kind of writing, just to conclude, the kind of writing that we're going to value will end up being outside of the consensus, conformist, bureaucratic model of writing. We are going to value people who can be outside that. Why? Because that will indicate that the author herself is capable of judging the institutional structures, the institutional writing. Being deviant and being able to manifest deviance in an interesting way will indicate that you are able to take responsibility, that you are able to demonstrate good judgment. You, in that case, won't be an instrument of the institution, because guess what? That instrument can now be an AI. You are going to be a decision maker, a responsible decision maker in relation to those instruments and in relation to the institution. So the very character type of institutional power is going to change fundamentally. Instead of administrators being conformists, being pleasers, being good students, being able to socially navigate, we're going to be looking for deviants. We're going to be looking for freaks to run our institutions. And that's going to be great. And with that, I'll say thank you. So. I don't know, I scared everyone away with the linear separability.
All right, we have time for questions. I see Dr. Mandic has a question. We have a student with a question. If you could come speak into the microphone, that would be helpful.
Hi, Pete Mandic, philosopher and robot. So I'd like your reaction to the following. So when I think about AI and the possibility of using it for liberating individuals, freeing them up, by analogy to the way that I don't need to know long division anymore.
Right.
To help my daughter do her homework, I had to go reteach myself long division because I hadn't done it since the 80s. And then I forgot it again. So when I think about what would be the analogy between the way calculators have liberated me from arithmetic, I think about the ultra powerful and the ultra rich and how I could be like them, not by being more powerful or more rich, but by having a team at my disposal. The president doesn't write his own speeches. He has a speechwriter. He has several speechwriters, a team of speechwriters. The rich and the powerful have teams of lawyers. Jeff Bezos has someone who selects DVDs for him to be at different locations that he's going to be traveling to make sure that he's always entertained in just the right way. And you too, maybe, could have a team at your disposal Like Tony Stark in his Iron Man suit has Jarvis always there, right? Hey Jarvis, you know, like, should I turn left or right? And Jarvis can do some of the thinking for him. To bring this back to writing and education, maybe what students are going to be taught to do is not produce the text, but to learn how to manage a team, to learn how to curate, to learn how to know when they've got a good team versus a bad team, to know like what would be good prompts or good directions to give their AI lawyers or their AI DVD curators. You know, we already have experience now with people that are really good DJs, really good at making playlists, people that are excellent curators.
Yeah.
And some people are better managers than others.
Yeah.
So one way of thinking about education to liberate is to give students the tools not to produce the text, but to manage the team of that will do the production for them. So I'm just curious what your reaction is to that. Thank you.
Yeah, I concur. So what does that mean concretely? Well, I mean, I set up this contrast between Nietzsche and Oldpine, right? And what would, let's take Professor Mandick's sort of core insight there, which was, you know, curation, management, presence, embodiment, I would say, being sensitive to what really matters. So values, right? Reflecting the values of your community, but also being critical in relation to those values. And, you know, that's a different character type than the character type that has achieved ascendancy in traditional institutional hierarchies. It's going to be a character type that is going to be have some of those skills that you're talking about, which we often call them like soft skills, right? Like emotional intelligence, you know, et cetera. But ultimately, I think what we're talking about is good judgment. And how do we cultivate good judgment in young people? How do we cultivate the capacity to relate to other people in productive ways? How do we understand, you know, sensitivity to power? And if I'm in charge, how does the way I talk shape the success of the group? How do I deploy power in ways that are good or for the good or for the mission? I think a lot of what we do is we act like GPT. We look to what the consensus is. A lot in people in administrative positions. We look to what consensus is. We look to the way the wind is blowing. We try to conform to that, just like GPT does, right? GPT can only do that, right? GPT is a pleaser, fundamentally. We need to be able to be in a position to be critical of those consensus views and to have that capacity. So, for example, Dean Davis asked about discriminatory effects of visual AIs or pattern recognition AIs, which absolutely, that's a fundamental problem. And the response from her brother was, depends on the data set, right? So the data set shapes the, right. Notice that that is the kind of critical interrogation that takes us out of consensus or out of that sort of acceptance and allows us that critical capacity that we can judge. We can say, look, clearly there's an issue here. So for example, predictive policing, which I guess they were using in New Jersey. So predictive policing, you can use the history of police activity, of arrests, et cetera, to determine where to put the squad cars in the neighborhoods. Now, what is the problem with that? Well, where do people get arrested? People get arrested where the police are, right? So it's a self-reinforcing, historically shaped tool. Now, so what do? Well, we adopt a critical attitude towards, obviously, the data sets themselves. It's like, how did we accumulate all this historic arrest data. And we're not stupid, right? We know how that happens. And then we'll say, okay, well, we can correct for that. We can correct in various ways. So Dr. Davis this morning was saying, look, there's no bias in the tool. The bias is, in this case, in the data set. Well, there are actually some biases in the tools, but we can talk about that during lunch. The data set, obviously, we need to be critical in relation to the data set in ways that we're coming to recognize. So we are developing, thanks to philosophers, actually, hooray philosophy. We are developing that critical capacity in relation to these technologies. And we are doing that Baconian project, like in Solomon's house, of making those kinds of judgments. And I think we're doing a decent job. And we're doing a decent job in part, I think, because of marginal voices. So women, black people, other minorities have shaped that critical capacity in the initial wave of AI ethics in ways that I think we wouldn't have done otherwise. Okay? So that's not just me pandering or being politically correct or anything like that. I really think as a mechanism, the margins need to speak. Okay? So we need the freaks, the outsiders, the marginal, to help us understand what it means to have a critical perspective on what ultimately is an institutional arrangement, a sort of a very traditional institutional arrangement. Now it's just embodied in GPT-4, okay? So it's an embodiment of what we already have. Okay, long answer, sorry.
Hi, my name is Chris Cugliari, and my
Chris?
question, yes. My question was, early in the presentation you mentioned calculators being related, or kind of like a parallel to what GPT is coming now.
Mm-hmm.
Calculators are integrated into the school system, so when you're taking a math class, you have a calculator with your use and you're able to do more things because you're not bogged down with the calculations.
Yeah.
Do you think it would be smart to integrate GPT-4 and Windows Copilot and all these
Yeah.
new AI language models
Yeah.
into schools like
I
calculators?
mean, we
have
have
been?
no choice. I think it's already the case that probably most of our students are using these things, right? So we have no choice. So I think we're already there. We just have to figure out how to do it. And that's going to require us rethinking, for example, I'm not ever going to assign the paper about Descartes versus the empiricists on, et cetera. Something I might have done 10 years ago. Never going to do that again, right? And there's absolutely no point in that. And I think we're fooling ourselves if we think we can do business as usual and still keep our jobs, for example. Like, what is the point in that case, right? What is the point of my job if that's the way these things are? Yeah, so we're stuck with it. It's not going to be a bad thing. It's going to be new. It's going to be interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chris.
Hi, Dr. Symons. My
Hey.
name is Jim Miles. I'm the Director of Digital Learning. I'm representing our online audience
Cool.
here. So this question comes from Kay Conrad, and the question is, I've come to similar conclusions about style, value, and responsibility, but I do wonder whether there's a difference between robot writing, bureaucratic writing, and just plain genre.
Oh, that's a deep and difficult question, and I confess, so is this Katie Conrad?
I'm not sure. It just says Kay Conrad.
Kay Conrad. I think this person is an English professor, and so I'm out of my depth here. They're going to know more about these things than I do. I'm drawing a very simple distinction between, the bureaucratic and the non-bureaucratic. I'm sure literary scholars can say much more interesting things. I just wanted to make a very blunt point. So I don't know, does she or he respond?
They haven't followed up, but we're on a delay. You
Okay.
just started responding to my question on the
Okay.
YouTube. So
Yeah, I
she responded. She said, "Yes, it is."
yeah, okay. Yeah.
And she said, "Hi, John."
Oh, okay, great. Hi, Katie. Yeah, great. It's really nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your question.
An enthralling presentation.
So So if you have questions at all, or you want to ask me anything or stay in touch, I would love that. So please send me an email.
Excellent, thank you. So make sure you check in with your QR code. And also, we'll reconvene at 2 o'clock for the afternoon session. It's going to be another 2 great speakers. I hope most of you can make it back. And meanwhile, now enjoy a nice break and have some lunch. Thank you.